the home of the Montgomery County Historical Society. I'm Bob Wernle, a member of the Historical Society Board, and this morning we're going to interview another member of the Historical Society Board, Ralph Barker, who represents the genealogy section of the Historical Society. As you all are aware, this is a series of interviews being made of people who had their experiences during World War II, this being the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Today we're going to be interviewing Ralph here, who was taken into the service as a draftee late in the war. And I'm going to today sort of touch upon a problem that I didn't know how to approach, of the men who were taken into the Army, most of them late in the service. Early in the service, those of us who went in were, for the most part, single men with no dependents. As the war went on, and more and more people became involved, the draft boards began to take in men with wives and even with children. And Ralph was one of those who was taken in late in the war. There are some poignant stories of here in Crawfordsville, for example, that I'm going to try to handle later on. For example, there was a case of Professor Leavenworth, Annie Leavenworth's son, Bill Leavenworth, lived up at the top of the Grand Avenue Hill in an old house there that Professor Leavenworth was a Romance language teacher at the college, and he had a son named Bill who was married to, his wife's name was Martha. They had a young child, very young child. In fact, the child, I'm not sure that he wasn't born after Bill went into the service. And there's a story that I heard when I first came to town of Mrs. Jolly, who ran the, I don't know whether you remember this or not.
I remember the Jolly name.
Mrs. Jolly ran the Western Union office down in the lobby of the Crawford Hotel,
yeah.
if you will recall.
I possibly remember a little bit about
and
Jolly, I think.
Mrs. Jolly lived right down at the base of the Grand Avenue Hill, and she told me that, and Bill Leavenworth was killed in the war, leaving Martha and her little son, Bill Jr. And she told me that when she sat there one day, and you remember how that tape used to come in on Western Union, ticker tape coming off the tape, and she saw that tape coming in, telling about young Bill Leavenworth, who was her neighbor, who had been her neighbor right above, being killed. And she said that when she saw that, she just crossed her arms and bent over and cried right there in the Western Union office. There's the other story about Raymond Stump. Do you remember this?
No.
Katie Stump married. She married later on Louis Darst, who was the principal of Crawfordville High School.
I wouldn't know that.
Katie had two little children, a boy and a girl, and Raymond was drafted late in the war. He was killed over in Germany, I believe, drowned crossing a river or something, and there Katie was left with these two little kids. somewhere or other we've got some way to approach that and be able to tell that story. And that's one of the things that I want to touch upon with you, Ralph, because I know that happened to you. You were drafted late in the war. Tell us about your background. What's your date of birth?
Well, I'm born in 1917.
Well, what's the date?
16th of April.
16th of April, 17. And where were you born?
I was born in Putnam County, and of course back then, you didn't always go to the hospital. You went home.
And
I was born in Putnam County in Jackson Township, actually.
where did you? What was your background? Were your folks farmers?
My folks was farmers. Yeah. I was born and raised as a farmer.
And did you live there in Putnam County then? Or?
Well, I actually, when I got away first, as a teenager, about 19 years old, I went to Indianapolis, got work. I worked around on the farms, young people before that, and like in the harvest and what have you. But I went up there and I got a job at the Diamond Chain in Indianapolis, and I worked there for, I think it was, well, I worked for a year and a half, and the way it turned out, this company, they had slack periods, and they had slack periods, and of course they went by the layoff on how who was hard last, in other words.
Yeah.
So I was one of them, was laid off, but I went back down, of course, with my folks, and couldn't stay with my folks, but in the meantime, I was checking around trying to get another job, and I got a farm job down here in Newmarket, here in Montgomery County, and I worked down there for...
Who'd you work for?
Well, oh boy, that's, you caught me.
Well, I just
well, Martin, that's what I was trying to think of. Martin boys, there's 3 of them down there, and I stayed at one guy boarded me.
Yeah.
3 farmers, they farmed together, and they boarded me and paid me so much, and it wasn't very much a day, but so much a day for working on the farm. But I hadn't been working too long till I got a notice I got a telegram actually from the Diamond Chain, and I thought I was going back to work at the Diamond Chain, and they told me to come in and see them in Quantum. That's what it said on the thing. So I went in, and they said, we can't put you to work yet because we're still work slow. But said, you go out to International Harvester, and he said they'll put you to work. He gave me a letter to take out there, see, recommendation, in other words. Well, I went out there, and of course, first thing, the guy told me, sure, I'll put you to work. And I was supposed to come in Monday from a physical on the following Monday, and that was on a Thursday, I believe, when I was up there. And of course, if luck would have it, my luck was just to run about the same as Dad all along. And I took the old-fashioned measles.
Oh.
I got real sick I was real sick on Monday or Sunday, but I had a sister living in west part of Indianapolis, and she told me I could stay there with them and go to work at the International Harvester work. So and I proceeded to got my clothes and everything ready, and I went home with my sister, but I was all in, and I still didn't know what the matter with me, I just didn't feel good. And it ended up, I had the old-fashioned measles. I was in bed for a week. I didn't get to go out to work, and of course, after I got over the measles, they told me to come in to see him, and I went in, and he told me, he said, we'll put you to work. He said, if we had to fill your job, which he's right, I understood, So I went on for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I got a call and went out there and went to work there in International Harvester. But this leading up to this other.
Yeah. Well, let's, somewhere along the line here, you got married then.
Yeah, in 1940.
And
but
did you marry somebody from around here?
Well, I married Helen Marie Cunningham from Putnam County. Actually, she lived in Putnam County.
Mhm.
And,
Were you, at that time, what kind of a job did you have?
well, when I got, that's when I first, I was working at the International Harvester.
Uh-huh.
When-
And what did you do with International Harvest?
Well, I run all kinds of,
Machinery?
automatic, well, I worked on the block line, they call it, for the, truck blocks, loaders. And, actually, the job that I did, was called multiple, my actual job most of the time was multiple drills. And what they did, I had one operation that drilled 140-some holes at one time.
Yeah.
And in this job, though, the way we worked out, we could run any job on the line.
Well, now, Ralph, when did your kids start coming along?
Well, I had my first daughter was born in '41.
Is she still around?
Yes, she lives down by Wallace,
Uh-huh.
her family. Patricia,
Excuse me,
sure. She was
okay.
born at St. Francis Hospital in Memphis.
Uh-huh. And she married a farmer?
Well, she married when she first got married, she married a gentleman from Wallace that was, I reckon you'd say he was, well, he done a little everything.
Yeah. What about, did you have another child beside that?
Well, in '44, I had another girl.
Uh-huh.
I was born in.
And are they both living now?
Yes, yeah. She lives in Virginia right now.
Okay. Now, what point, tell us about, did you stay with the International Harvester until the time you graduated?
No, I was International Harvester for about 2 years, and I left there and went to Schweitzer Cummins, they're an Indianapolis factory.
Uh-huh.
And, but in '41, I believe it was, I'm born and raised on a farm, so I thought I wanted to go to farming.
Mhm.
So that's when I quit, actually just quit to go to farm, quit at Schweitzer Cummins. And Switzer, how you want to call it, I don't know Schweitzer. But I went to farming, and I had to borrow for almost all the equipment and what have you to buy it. And I rented a farm in Henry County. And I went in there in the spring and got my crop in and all, and then before I got my crop out, I got a notice from Uncle Sam that he wanted me to go to service.
So you were registered in a draft board over in Indiana?
Yeah, I was registered. I was living in Indianapolis when I registered. See, that was the reason.
You would have thought you'd been deferred for that?
I would have thought so, because I had neighbors lived across the road from me, had some single boys that didn't have to go.
Okay.
But they were farmers too.
Yeah.
But of course, there again, I can't blame them too much. Some of them that helped me when I found out I had to have a sale and sell everything. They helped me get my crop in. I had 30 days to do all that, and so they all, neighbors and all came in and helped me get it done. But I went and left my wife and 2 kids, and I went in service.
Yeah, was your wife well at the time?
Well, no, she was on crutches. She'd had milk legs in both legs with the second daughter. And she acted like she was born.
Uh-huh.
And so she was on crutches when I left. So it put quite a hardship on her. And
All right, now where were you taken into the service?
well, Camp Atterbury is where I actually was inducted.
Where you reported in?
But I was inducted there, but I was there about 3 days and shipped to Camp Waters, Texas, for
And
training.
what, was that infantry replacement training?
Yes, it was.
And what was your assignment then?
Well, actually, I got 6 weeks training there. But
Basic training?
Basic training, they rushed you through. And, but I will if you don't mind. Chris, since my name was begin with a B, why, right off the bat, well, they put me on KP. So, you know.
That's exactly the way it happened. Those of the
Until
W's never got on KP.
well, see, until they had goof ups that they could put in. You know, so if you goofed up, then they, or for some reason, they punish you, well, they put you on KP.
Yeah.
But anyway, I went over there, and I never will forget it because I sat down to a big 100-pound bag of potatoes to peel them by hand, you know.
Yeah.
And I hadn't got very many peeled till first the mess sergeant come in there, and he said, Ralph, he said, the first sergeant wants to talk to you. And I said, what do you want? He said, I don't know. So I went in and talked to him. He said, how would you like to be squad leader? I said, well, I said, that'd be all right. I said, what I have to do? He said, nothing, just march and help keep the boys in line and do your own thing. And so I said, well, if that's what he wants to do, I said, well, what about KP? I was supposed to be on KP, but I said, they've already taken care of that.
Yeah.
So I was squad leader while I was in training. And, but I think one reason, see, I was 27 when I went in service.
Yeah.
And I'm a little older than these other young kids, 18, 19 years old coming in. So that's one reason I think they put me in charge, more or less. And then ended up, I was in charge of the first platoon, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was just there 6 weeks. And then they shipped me out and I went to Fort Ord, California.
Yeah. And what outfit did you join at Fort Ord?
Well, we didn't join any actual outfit there. We were just replacements.
Okay.
To go over in the Pacific area, see, and so I was left there, and believe it or not, now this, to some people may not be any interest, but it took us 28 days from the time we left Fort Ord till we got to the Philippines.
Yes, I can understand.
But the reason for it was our boat zigzagged with a troop ship, and it zigzagged to keep the enemy submarines from getting the sight on you. That was the whole idea. But our skipper, believe it or not, we were supposed to have went with the convoy. And he said, now, I'm not going with any convoys, that they're laying for convoys. He said, I'll get them over there safe. And we ended up, we went down to the tip of New Guinea. And then back up, worked our way back to the Philippines. And at Blue Island, I know I happened myself, of course a lot of us, you know, got seasick on the boat and what have you, and a lot of them didn't. I never bothered me too much. I could feel it coming on, but me and another kid, this incident I'm talking about, we decided if we got our mind on something else, see, if you get your mind off of yourself, you don't get sick. So we sat down out on the dock and was playing cards, just the two of us. And somebody said something, and I went down, and I got big time, we on 28 days, I got pretty good friends with some of the sailors, you know. So the guy that worked in the galley, they call it the kitchen, which you understand probably what I'm talking about. He said, come down here. They had shortwave radio on, and they was getting some messages on it, you know. All at once we said, we heard it. Ship that we was on was sunk. But we had noticed at the meantime what had happened. We said,
what was the ship that you were on? What was the name of it, you know? Remember? Was it a Liberty ship?
Yeah. Got things thinking a minute, doggone it. I come back on the General Taylor, and I went over on the, oh boy, it was called General something, but I'll think of it maybe correctly. But anyway, what I'm going to tell you, me and this other fellow that was playing cards, we had noticed all at once. We even made a remark about it before we went down the galley. See that, boy, we're moving, you know, and all at once we could just, I mean, you could tell, and you look down the water, it was really taking off. And what we done, see, they got word on the radar and everything that they had on the ship that they seen enemy planes coming in.
Mhm.
And so our captain, or the charge of the boat, he just took out. He didn't wait for nobody or nothing.
Mhm.
He took out of there, and we were away from. We didn't even see the planes or anything. And I guess he sunk a bunch of boats, and of course they counted heads. In other words, after
Yeah.
that, and after when they went to counting, we weren't there. So they reported us sunk. We heard her on.
How many fellows were on your ship, do you remember?
Oh, about 4,000 or something.
Uh-huh.
I think it's 4,700, I believe they said.
Okay.
But
What were the conditions on the ship? How was the food? How was the sleeping?
well, it was hotter than heck down in the hold, I'll tell you, where you slept. It was hot. Of course, we had usually with double bunks in sleeping quarters. And you just had a guy on you or a guy over you, whichever bunk you was in other words.
Mm-hmm.
They just swinging bunks. Actually, they were in the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they would swing too.
You mean hammocks?
Yeah, that's what they were like, hammocks.
Hammocks.
We called them bunks, but they were hammocks.
And how was the food?
Well, I think we had good food on board. I'd say we did.
How many meals a day did you eat?
Well, I think if I ain't mistaken, we eat 3 meals.
3 meals a day. Okay.
But we had, after the Palua Island incident, we went on, and when we got to the Philippines, we got there right after the liberation. Again, I mean, after the Japs took it, and then
Yeah.
we went back in, but we were right after they went through Manila, in other words. And there's so many ships sunk in the harbor there at Manila Bay that we had to go in landing boats. You couldn't get close enough to their dock or anything else, you know, before take over. So we had to all go over the side of the ship and go on landing boats. But we went into what they called the 6th Replacement Center, I think they called it. And what they done there was, we were there about 2 weeks, and we was helping build sidewalks and stuff, just work actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that they got rules and regulations in the Army. And we was out working on those sidewalks, and they told you, whatever you do, and it's about 110 in shade, and we was out in the sun. They said, whatever you do, don't take your shirts off. Leave your shirts on. Because if you're hot, still in the morning, you blister. We worked so long out there, it's hot, and heck with that noise, we took our shirts off, some of us. About a half a day of that, that first day, and at night, I couldn't sleep, couldn't lay down to sleep. I was so sore. And the next day, I hated to do it because I had ordered them to take the shirts off, that I had to go to sick call. And what makes me remember that so well was the fact that they put something to paint on myself where I blistered so bad that really, and I can't find, I never found anything like it anymore. I can't find it around here anywhere, anything that'll cure it like that. But it's sure that I took care of my blister. From then on, even over there in the Philippines, I can go without a shirt, not blister. But I'm like complected.
Yeah.
But that's a little incident. But anyway, so at that time then, after about 2 to 3 weeks, we were assigned to what our outfits, in other words. And the outfit I was assigned to, they called the Bushmasters, was the
Bushmaster.
158th Regimental Combat Team is what they were, actually. And they usually, I think if I'm not mistaken, when we first joined it, I was in the 6th Army. I mean, they were in the 6th Army, the group was. But then the 8th Army had a job to do, so we were assigned to the 8th Army. So they put us, actually what we did was, they had a lot of stragglers, and all from this liberation of the Philippines. They had a lot, actually the main
Yeah.
Part of the battles went through, why they had a lot of Japs that were stragglers, more or less, and our job was to go out on patrols, and we went into a lot of them, had a lot of snipers and stuff like that. Of course, that goes, and you run into pretty good groups once in a while. Of course, the nice part about it too in the Philippines, or any jungle, I guess you'd call it, of course, we were taught to always keep one arm up at all times, because we had bushmaster snakes over there. They were big. And if they drop down around you, they crush you. They just wrap around you and they crush your bones. And because I've seen it happen. And I know
You mean you saw?
I saw one of my buddies get it.
What happened? Tell us about that.
Well, we were marching through the jungle, and of course it was pretty thick. I mean, and the thing was, you can't have eyes everywhere at the same time. And of course, I assume, I don't know, he maybe didn't have that one arm up like he's supposed to have, I don't know. Because they say if you do that, you got where you get your bayonet or something, or your knife or something, and kill the snake, see, before he kill you. Because what he does, he's not biting you, he just crushes you. The bushmaster is what they call it. And this one boy, and I can't recall his name, I wish I could, but I can't recall his name. But I did see one drop down and got both of his arms. And it actually, before anybody could, some of the rest of them killed the, on him, killed the snake, but it was too late. He crushed his ribs and everything. He just crushed him. But I mean, that was just one.
Show us that patch that you've got there for the bushmaster. See what.
There's the bushmaster patch. Can you see that all right, Mike?
Yeah, let me zoom in a little bit. Just hold it there.
That's a machete with a bushmaster snake wrapped around it. That was our logo, in other words. That's why they call it bushmasters.
Well, now, where did you go in the Philippines? What island were you on?
Well, right after I joined the outfit, we got on a small BT something boat. I forget exactly what they call them. But it was like a speedboat, more or less, but they just could haul a squad or a platoon. I think a whole platoon got on it. And I was in with the actually 3rd platoon was what. But I was in Company A with the 3rd platoon. And but we went around to a little island, believe it or not, they call it San Francisco. They call this island. And we made a practice beach landing first. There was nobody on that. Well, we didn't think there was any enemies on that island. But this is just one day at a time. I mean, first thing we did one day. And then we sailed from there to Legazpi. And maybe you don't know where Legazpi is, but it's
I never heard of it.
Well, it's in the southern part of the Philippines, and there's I won't say Legazpi. It's a mountain, mountain, I guess you'd call it. Peak, I guess you'd call it, Legazpi Peak, they call it. But we made a beach landing there, but now we were the follow-up after the main battle there. Yeah. But actually, believe it or not, we did go in under fire. There's some Japs we still were shooting at us when we went in. It wasn't too many, thank goodness. That's the only reason we got in without too much trouble. But we didn't have as much trouble there going in landing boats as we did afterwards. When we got got back because see, our boat, the boat that we were on, bombarded this before we went in. Naturally, you know, they do so we could go in under
soften them up.
But after they had got back where the guns on the boat wasn't reaching now, in other words, see. And then we run into quite a few. We had actually, where it ended up, we were stationed at a little place called, I used to call it Bow. That's BOA, I think was the place. Now our regimental combat, our regimental war headquarters was at Naga in the Philippines, on the same island, part of the island, really. I got in there.
How did you get ashore?
On foot in the water, you jumped out, you could landing boat, you took you so far,
Yeah.
and then you jumped out with you had a full
Were you
field
under
pack.
fire then?
You had a full field pack.
What
on
kind
your
of
back.
fire were they putting on you?
Well, it's rifle fire, most of it. Because see, they got most of the gun emplacements, although we did find 2 or 3 machine gun emplacements they hadn't got that we took out ourselves.
Did you have any mortar fire?
We had some mortar, not too much. We used a lot of mortar for ourselves. I didn't. I was actually a rifleman, but we had the mortar.
And what was your equipment? Did you use an M1?
I had an M1.
Did you have a bayonet on your M1?
We sure did.
And did you keep the bayonet on there all the time?
Well, we didn't when we made our landing.
You did not?
We did.
You did?
We had that bayonet on when we made our landing.
Okay.
Because we didn't know what we were going into,
Yeah.
in other words. But later on, we had our bayonet, we carried it on our belt. And we could going to get into hand-to-hand combat, well, we just slip it on your rifle ground, just like that, when it's on there, just like loading a rifle, in other words. But as far as that goes, we didn't, outside of the landing, we didn't carry the bayonet on there all the time. But
Now, did you have any face-to-face encounters with the enemy?
well, we saw quite a few different groups of Japs that we actually got surprised them. We slipped up on it, and you can imagine what happened to them. Of course, they told us, everybody, like anything else, you hate to tell the people this, but it's the truth. They said, do we take prisoners? Well, they said, it's up to you. If you want to take care of them, gain part of your rations, whatever, you take prisoners. So automatically, you didn't try to. But no, I can say one thing, all I can say is we had, as I said, my whole squad, as a rule, run into quite a bit of shooting and killing. We killed quite a few Japs, but whether one Jap that I know that I was guilty, in other words, or you don't call it a killing, was we were going through a pretty thick jungle, and there was a bush, so I don't know, about as big as half of this room or bigger, I suppose. As we was going through, we spread out, so forth. I don't know, probably.
Were you a squad leader?
Well, at that time, I was second scout, believe it or not, in our squad. I had a first scout. There was a little young fellow, and he was about 18, 19 years old, and he's a little guy. He wanted to be scout, but I was second scout, and he's first scout. And we went in advance of our squad as a rule. In any of our adventures, or what you want to call them, we would actually be in the lead.
Did you volunteer for this, or like the other fellow?
They actually, I had been squad leader, and they asked me if I would be first scout. And I said, I'm sure I will be. So him and I, we had a few experiences too. But what I was going to say, we were going along, and he was up ahead of me, and this same Jap had to let him go by. If he seen him, he might not have saw him. But anyway, he stepped out behind this bush, and of course we were taught we didn't aim the rifle at all. We didn't over there in jungle fighting. You don't think about such a thing. But we carried a rifle ready at all times, right, just like that. And he stepped out of my there, and I guess I pulled the trigger before he did. That's all I tell you, because I got it. But that's the only, I can say, instance I know that I killed somebody. Not that I'm proud of it or anything. It's just something that happens. It's one of your jobs, in other words.
Yeah.
I do. But I do have it's not maybe a nice thing to talk about, but these things you run into, you don't know the culture of these islands, people in these islands, because, as I said, they had, we call them huts. They'd all up off the ground so forth. And we come up to a hut, and we heard something. We couldn't figure what it was. It did sound like someone moaning, but we wasn't sure, you know. And so I said to this first scout, I said, and of course our squad was back waiting for us to tell them to come on or what, you know, or what would take place. And I said, I'll go this way and you go the other way around. They said, well, I went one way around and the other. And we couldn't see anything and never got no far or anybody or anything, you know. And so we went up and had to go up steps to go in. Went up the steps and went inside, and there lay an old lady in her waist, believe it or not, in her waist.
Yeah.
And she laying there moaning and about dead, in other words. Well, the first thing we did, all we did was just got back out of there after seeing what it was, you know, and got back out and made a little village, just a little piece down where we got. We got down to this village, what we told the Filipinos there at the village, you know, about this lady being back there, you know, we thought they should see about her. Oh, no, that's all right. She said, they just, when they get old like that, they send them off to themselves to die. We didn't, I mean, that's what I say, a little incident.
Yeah. Did you get to know the Filipinos at all?
Quite a bit, yes.
And how did you, were they cooperative?
Very cooperative, yes, they were. They were tickled to death that we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And, no, they were, and we had, in fact, we had what they call they ain't commandos, but anyway, they were people that helped us. In other words,
Philippine
soldiers.
Scouts?
Yeah, they were Philippine soldiers that helped us and joined part of our outfit.
Yeah. Did they help you when you're advancing through the jungle?
Oh yeah, the Filipino scouts helped us go through and tell us on where they thought they were. They could tell us maybe where they might be holed up, you know, some gaps, different things like that. But no, for us, the battle part, we had a lot of snipers shooting at us once in a while, and that was left. And then some of the Japs that went back up into the mountains and hid, in other words, and even when the war was over, after they surrendered and everything, well, a lot of them never even knew it. See, because they wasn't, they got away from their outfits and they didn't know, you know, that the war was over. So we still had a lot of stragglers that didn't know anything about it. You had to be careful for.
Ralph, now, I want to touch on something here. What about your communication back with your wife and your kids?
Well, she kept writing me and saying, I don't get no letters, you know, don't get no letters, you don't get no letters, you know. And then I got a letter one day, she said she got 40 one day.
40 letters?
Yeah, but it had been about a month and a half, 2 months before she hadn't got anything to go see. But she got 40 letters at one time, so that's the way they piled up, see.
How was your wife maintaining herself back home?
Well, more or less, I put it this way, at that time, when I went in service, I didn't tell you this, I moved her down to, in Putnam County, her folks lived down there. And I rented a little house down there about 2.5 miles from her folks. And they checked on her and helped her out, and of course she was getting by on what little that I sent her home. Plus, she had to help pay off the loan, the rest of the loan that our sale did.
How big a loan was that?
Well, I forget exactly, but I think we still owed, I'll put it this way, after we sold everything, all our farm equipment, machinery, and the crop, before I went into service, I had to do it just right now. And I think I ended up owing them $800, which wasn't much, but today it wouldn't be much.
Yeah.
It was a lot when you don't have a penny.
And
But
How
she
did
paid
you-
it off with what little money I sent on. What I did, see, I'd get so much money for myself, and then she got a check, a little check. It wasn't much.
Yeah.
You know what back in the 40s,
Yeah.
you didn't get a whole lot. But all I would save would be, kept money was enough. We had to pay for a laundry, and you sent it out to get a laundry or something away from the county. Why, I saved enough for that, and of course, foolish me, I smoked at that time, cigarettes, and I kept enough for cigarettes. But we got to take cigarette rations once in a while, but you didn't get enough cigarettes, you had to buy something if you smoked. But outside of that, I sent the rest of them home.
Yeah.
I could send her usually $75, something like that, about every month or so. And time I got home, she had the rest of his loan paid off. She was working at it.
Did she work, or did she just stay home
No,
and take care of the kids?
she couldn't, actually. She wasn't in shape to do it at that time. And she took care of the kids more or less and just had made a go of it.
Did your parents help her?
Oh, yes, much as they could, but they weren't in no position to help either, because my parents were pretty poor too, I guess you'd call it. They had a little home they lived in, they owned it, and that's it. And at that time, that wasn't able to work.
Yeah.
And so they were just getting by on a little check too. So they couldn't help much, only just, I guess, to actually be there for her if she needed help and stuff like that.
How long were you in the Philippines?
Well, see, I got in the Philippines April of 45, and I left there in April
Of 46. You were
And,
there for a year.
actually, I left there in 46 in April, but I got my discharge the 11th. Now, wait a minute, I told you wrong on that. I left there, and it was in 1st of April, but I got my discharge 11th of April. So we shipped out and got.
Well, where did you go up to Japan then, or where did you go from
No.
the Philippines?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Okay.
You're right, I left the Philippines the 4th of October in
Okay.
45. Yeah, I think about when I come home.
Well, now, did the entire time that you were in the Philippines, was that combat?
No, see, in August when they surrendered, from then on, actually we had, I'd say, a week or two that we had, as I said, get stragglers and stuff that didn't know the war was over, this, that, and the other, but we were actually there until October. And but now our outfit, the Bushmasters, were assigned to go in and make a peace landing in Japan, at Yokohama. D-Day +4. Our outfit was already been set up to do that when the war was over. So what we did, consequently, we went to Japan anyway, for occupational force, in other words. We went in there, and a little place called, I can't say it, Tochigi. I ain't pronouncing it right probably, but I call it Tochigi. But the Japanese, you said Tochigi, they'd correct you, call it a little different name, but call them, sounded different than that.
Yeah.
We went in there where we went. Now, when I got over there, it was similar to what I did in when I first went into training. I hadn't been, I think, the second day. I was in the kitchen eating, and mess sergeant come in, and not the same mess sergeant either. But he came in there and said, "How do you like to work in the kitchen?" I said, "Well, what do I have to do?" He said, "Nothing." I said, "Oh, what do you mean, nothing?" He said, "Well," I said, "I want you just to be KP pusher." He said, "I want you to, they're going to have Japanese doing the KP work in the kitchen, said just oversee it. That's all you have to do, just oversee the guys on KP. I said, well, all right, maybe if that's what you want. So I ended up in the kitchen.
That's when we got to Japan.
Yeah, and we were set up in an airplane factory. The kitchen was, and they had barracks for the Japanese. They were like a barracks. There was room for 10 people in each little barrack, little quarters. There's 10 in the quarter, and there's a whole bunch of them quarters. The workers worked in that factory. That was their quarters, the Japanese. And we were, that was the sleeping quarters, in other words. But I have to tell you, I couldn't tell you other about it, maybe don't mean nothing, but rats, they had rats bigger than cats. And we would take, they had, maybe a lot of people don't know that bacon cans, our bacon in the Army came in bacon cans that were about that long, and they were about this big square. And we would take bacon cans and tack them up in the corners of our quarters down so far from the ceiling. And every morning you get up, you'd have a whole mess. Well, it wouldn't have to be morning, but you had 2 or 3 big rats in those bacon cans. And of course, I didn't keep them all off of you because I know I can remember one night that I was sleeping, a big rat run right across my face. I knocked it off, and of course you can imagine what the noise, and I yelled without a doubt because I woke up everybody in the squad room. They wanted to watch they played, and I said, a rat right across my face. So, I mean, that's just little things that happen, you know, as you get into.
Now, this was after you got...
that was in Japan.
At this little place where the airplane factory was.
But what we were to do, we were to just take care of, either destroy any ammunition or equipment that they had there that they could fight with, in other words, or make it useless. Was our biggest job. I didn't since I worked in the kitchen, but that was our group's job.
Why did they, I didn't know that the Japanese lived like that. Why did they have so many rats? Was it around the kitchen?
Well, you'd have to go to Japan to know. I don't know how it is today, but you see, in Japan, they had little everplace. Any place or spot of ground, they raised vegetables, stuff they eat, just like you'd have a garden. But all they used was human waste for fertilizer. And you can't believe the smell. It's something that you just, to us, you smelled it all the time. And it soon got to where it was, even on your clothes, you think, you know, you just that smell. And it was just from that human waste they used. You didn't dare, they didn't, the Japs were supposed, they had containers where they went to the bathroom. And every so when they get full, they opened up the back, just like these old outside toilets, you know. They'd open up the back and they used that then for fertilizer. And that's why you can imagine why they had rats and everything else, but it was the way they lived.
Do you suppose that was because of the wartime?
Not necessarily. They just so many of them. There were so many of them. And we went to a time or two. We took a bus, to go from like Yokohama to Tokyo, and when we had a pass or something, and they would crowd and hang on them buses. They leave a mess in the station, and you couldn't hardly walk it's thick, the people were thick, and they crowded in them buses, stood and hung on the outside, hung on the thing just to get places, and they'd always leave a bunch at the station they didn't have room for. And I think that's the reason it was just crowded. The place is just crowded everywhere.
Well, any other experiences there? Did your wife save any of those letters that you wrote to her?
Well, yeah.
Or those little, those little letters that we used to get, you remember how they used to be, where you could, I've forgotten what they call those.
Well, we had, at that time, if I'm mistaken, we had free postage.
Yeah, free postage.
But I might have something here that,
You keep, you've got a scrapbook of your.
I got a scrapbook, 2 scrapbooks of the Bushmaster.
Well, I didn't mean to.
You know what I'm getting at? I think I have something here, if you don't take a second. I think I got a letter. I think it's this book, I may not have, maybe in the other books. I thought I might have a letter. No, that's not it. Maybe I don't. But anyway, she saved a lot of them, and she still got them in her box.
Did you save in the letters that you got?
They're in the same box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were they homesick letters, or were they?
Well, pretty much so. Some of them, I'm not much of a poet, but I try to make poems, you know, out of some of it I write. But some of them, some things I said in it probably you wouldn't want the public to know or see, but it was, like you said, they were homesick, more or less. Want to see her and her daughters. But, no, and in the Philippines, the Bushmasters, now I'll tell you, we didn't say anything about this, but not because that I was with this outfit, but they were counted as a miniature division. MacArthur himself called them that. And he said it was, and I've got his signature on some things in this book, that he said there was a fightless outfit in the service.
Well, that's pretty hazardous duty when you're out cutting your way through a jungle.
But yeah, we did have to cut her through a lot of it.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say there in Japan, then the outfit came home, my colors. They split up, see, and I didn't have enough points to come home because I went in so late.
Yeah.
And so I was transferred to another company in Tokyo, the chemical company they called it. And when the colors came home, the ones that had enough points came home with the colors. And the Bushmasters was a Arizona National Guard outfit originally. They had went down through Panama and worked from way back in 1940 and worked their way down, and then when after Pearl Harbor was attacked, why our outfit then started fighting the Japs in the
South Pacific.
Yeah, and they started down at New Guinea and worked their way back and up to the Philippines. Well, not to.
Did you have a lot of casualties in your outfit?
Oh yes, they found me a knife. For us numbers, I couldn't tell you because they were in the thousands, really. I've got, as he said a while ago, he said, oh, I wrote a scrapbook. I do have, because they've got an what you call a Bushmasters organization now, of the group, all of our different ones from all over the country that were in the Bushmasters that are surviving today. I get a quarterly.
Yeah.
And in this quarterly, there's some different people that writes their war experiences in that during the World War II. And I've got 2 big booklets full of those. And in fact, I've got 640 some pages of different people's experiences of the Bushmasters.
Yeah.
But what I was going to tell you now, since we've already covered the fighting part, why, when I went to 121st Chemical Company is what it was that I joined at Tokyo, and when I first got there, the major come around and he wanted to know who was plumbers, any plumbers in the group, were there mechanics and this, that, and the other, you know. And it was kind of a funny tale to tell, maybe, but nobody would volunteer. So he just said, you, he pointed me and another kid there. And we had to go over to his quarters, and what had happened, Japs or somebody had hooked up a shower for him in his quarters. And they'd hooked it up wrong. He'd just get soaked up good and the water would be colder than heck. And so we didn't know, I didn't know about it really, but just common sense. And me and this other kid, we seen what they done, so we hooked it up right and got him his. But we told him, we wasn't no plumbers. And well, I'm telling this tale, the fact that he went in and tried out the shower after we worked it over. He come out, he was all smiles, you know, he said, hey, that's more like it. He said, that worked. And he said the plumbers, he said like that, you know, the major did. We said, well, we told you what. And he found out, he went and looked at their orders. See, in their orders, I was listed as a mechanic. And so I said, well, but anyway, so what I did from then on till I got ready to come home, actually, it was, they had a bunch of stationary international motors with generators on. What they were for, they were, in fact, we hooked them up and got them ready. In case the electricity went off for any reason, we could crank these international motors up and have power. Had electricity and power the whole time. There were 4 different places they had these stations around where we were, or out there were stationed. And, but anyway, when I went into this, they put me in a laundry, this chemical company. And I worked one day as a mechanic in that. And that night, the guy there had, I said the guy, he's actually was the first sergeant, but he was on my shift, is what I get. I was on the second shift, they had 2 shifts. Well, anyway, he told me, they said, now he showed me the orders, he had orders in there, and I was supposed to got actually sergeant's rating. But we went to our bunks that night and just got good sleep, and fire alarm went off, and believe it or not, our laundry burned down. And I think it was set, actually. I think because the way it burned, I'm sure somebody said it, because we had all kinds of chemicals in there, it wouldn't take much, you know. Yeah. And so that's why that job went out in a hurry. I worked one day in the laundry, and then.
Did you get a promotion though?
No, that's what I say. On account, I would have if I'd stayed in the laundry, see, you know, as a mechanic.
Well, what was your rating?
Well, T5, they call it. Actually, that's corporal.
Corporal. Yeah. Well, now, did you come home then? When did you start back home?
Well, there's another incident that, like you was talking about, when they take people in that shouldn't be drafted. We was in, I think they called it the 4th replacement, I believe is what they called it there at Yokohama. They shipped us over to that, and we had to get on the boat. We had already had our orders, and we get on the boat. And they told them that some of the officers wanted to take enlisted men's quarters on the boat. They could, you know, if they didn't want to wait, because they got their own quarters if they went over ordinarily. And there was a lot of the officers wanted to go home, and there was a bunch of us left. We laid for the next boat. 30 days we laid just nothing to do in the replacement center, or not. Yeah, I think that's what they call the replacement center.
What year? When was this?
This was in 46, spring of 46.
Spring of 46.
But I'd been home a month earlier.
What ship did you come home on, do you remember?
General S. Taylor.
Uh-huh.
That's what they called it.
And how long did you take to get home?
Well, I don't think it was about, I think we've been there in 4 days. It ended up, we got it at about 5. From Japan to actually Seattle, where we come back.
Was it again a Liberty ship?
Yeah, it was.
Only 5 days to get from,
But see what happened, it would have been more than that, but
you skip a day when you cross the,
well, that wasn't, it was actually more than that, when I think about it, because I wasn't counting that day you lost a day
Yeah.
coming back. But what I was getting at, they had tidal wave, real bad. And I'd heard it reported that to stay, all boats stay away from shore or docks or shore,
yeah.
and Guinea was in there, they pulled together, and you know what they did? It was tidal wave, all right, and I never will forget it because the only thing I noticed about it, it wasn't nothing like rough water, nothing like that at all. You just, all at once, you just seemed like everything's bottom fell out of the boat. I mean, to tell you, it just go down, and then all at once you just go up straight up, straight down, straight up. That was that tidal wave that caused that. That took an extra day because of that.
Yeah. Well, you landed then in Seattle?
Yeah, we came into Seattle, and it was one of the most beautiful sights you ever looked at, because we came into the bay one evening, got in there of an evening. We didn't get off the boat the next day, see. But we came in, and I don't know anyone that's ever been out to sea there would know what I'm talking about, but Seattle is looks like on a hillside, you know what I'm getting at, the town itself, and they just rows and rows of lights, just this way up. Of course, it looked beautiful for me to come back anyway, but really that was a sight. Well, we came in there, and then the next morning, we didn't dock till the next morning, see. We docked the next morning, and of course, I've got all kinds of pictures I see, so I remember I go out of the boat and coming in. But I got on there at a slow train, you might say, left there, and slow train to Atterbury. It was in Annapolis, and got my discharge on 11th.
11th of what?
April.
In 1946. Okay, and was your wife there to meet you?
No, actually, it's kind of funny. She was meeting me at Greencastle. I got the bus from Annapolis to Greencastle. Of course, she lived out in the Morton there in Montgomery County. And so the funny part of it was there was no, they missed me. Actually, what happened. But I waited around, see nobody, so I got a taxi to take me out to the house. I got out there with nobody there, and then she came back then. She found out that and the taxi came, and she'd come to get me, but they went the wrong place, the way I understood her. They were supposed to come to the...
What about your kids? Did your kids know you?
Well, yeah. That's, that's another thing that stays with you all your life. I had a little girl that was 3 when I left to go into service. And the day I went to catch a train at Greencastle when I went to get on the train, my wife's sister had a hold of the little girl. Of course, my least girl was, my wife was holding her. And my 3-year-old, she broke away and run after I got to the train and tried to catch me. That does stick with you.
Yeah. Well, no, when you did get to see them, did your 3-year-old?
Oh yeah, she knew me real quick. When they're 3, they remember it all.
Yeah. All right. Now, what about what did you do after you got home?
Well, when I first came home, I took out a GI loan and bought me some farm equipment again.
Mhm.
But I rented, actually, we just rented grain rent. In other words, I didn't buy livestock, stuff like that. But I farmed for 2 years, just grain rent like that. And right after I did that, we lived right close to about 3 miles out of Morton, little town on 36. And the storekeeper up there, he run what they call the huckster wagon, delivering groceries through the country, you know, out through the farmers and all. So he approached me to drive that for him. And so for 2 years, I drove a huckster wagon, they called it, which was an interesting job, a very interesting job. And in fact, I enjoyed it. But then, as you start to say, that's about the time that I say the women started driving cars. There wasn't too many back then that did drive cars. And they started wanting to go to town. They had an excuse, you know, to go to town.
So the huckster business.
So they began to go downhill, and I could have went on. I was making a decent wage, really. I could have went on at it, but I told my boss, I said, you know, it seems like it's getting worse, and I believe I just got to make a little more money what I've been making.
What did you do then?
I went to Indianapolis again, went back to the Sweater Cummins.
And how long did you work there?
Well, let's see, I'm trying to stop and think. At that time, when I went to work up there, I moved from Morton. I lived out here by New Market, on a Chloe Ray's farm. In fact, she had a house out there.
Who was?
Chloe Ray, that's a lady that owned this farm, but she had nobody lived in his house, and we rented it. But I drove back and forth to Indianapolis to work. But I did have riders, there's 5 of us, and they paid all my expenses, and I forget exactly how I want to charge.
What kind of a car was it?
Well, I had an old I had a 1936 Ford, and then I traded it for a Studebaker, and drove that Studebaker a while. I had drove down and drive back to Indianapolis. You know how it is, the old cars. It was an old one, it wasn't a new one. And anyway, but what I was going to say after that, I drove back and forth over. I told my wife, I said, that's nuts. I said, I go up there and work 8 hours. I'm better than 2 hours on the road every day. I said, and all the expense, I ain't making no extra. And I'm going to put an application in locally. So I came up here and put my application in at Medical, and another place or two around town here, Medical area. And I think about a week is all I took a vacation from Schweitzer's. 2 weeks, I had 2 weeks vacation coming, so I took 2 weeks vacation. That's when I started to put my applications in. Well, heck, it was on a Friday evening, about 2 days after putting my application in, they had fish fry over at New Market. Of course, I drove with that, and I came home, and there's a big note. We lived back off the road a little piece, and at the gate out to the road, there was a note on the gate to come in and see Owen West at Medical.
Owen West, yeah.
And so I came up here to see him, but I did tell him I had to defer it again, but he wanted me to come in the next day. It was on Saturday, see. Come in and see him the next day. So I believe it or not, it was 10 o'clock at night. And he lived out here east of Crawfordsville, and I went out to his house and told him, got him out of bed. He went to bed. And told him, I said, I want to come up there, I want the job, and I want to come in, but I can't today because they're taking inventory up there, and I promised them I'd go back up and help the inventory twice the Cummins on Saturday. So he said, well, that's all right, to come in Monday. So I went to work Medical.
Yeah. Was that the same Owen West that ran the grocery store later?
Did I say Owen West?
You said west, Owen West.
I did say Owen West,
Yeah,
but Owen West, no, Owen West ain't the one owning the store.
yeah, okay. And how long did you work for West?
Well, I worked for, I'm just trying to think, I worked through, that was in '52, I believe, when I came up here a minute ago. And I worked through '55, and I got another smart idea, and went and bought a grocery store. And down in Milligan, Indiana, and it's out in the country away from bigger towns. Of course, I listened to the guy that wanted to sell it, and he got all these customers. But he had guys on the book when I took the store over. Oh, these guys are good, this guy's good, and that guy's good, you know, for this and that and the
So
other.
you went broke running a grocery store?
I went broke running a grocery store.
And how long did you stay there?
I was 2 years, but I went, the last year I worked there, I went to work for Mormon Feed Company. As a salesman. Actually, a salesman, I didn't work for salesman only just about 2 or 3 months, and they put me in as sales manager. And, but I did work, well, my wife would keep the store in the daytime, and then I was going to help on weekends. Of course, we was open until 11 o'clock, and we had a lot of customers and farmers and all the evenings. But what happened, I had a lot of creditors that didn't pay me, and first thing you know, you try to get supplies, and it wasn't enough, and paying you, the first you have to hold back, and can't buy this week, and the first thing you know, and you don't have what people want, then you got arm trouble. And that's what actually, I went downhill too fast, so I had to get rid of that.
Did you work for Mormon then for how long?
Well, I worked Mormon until '59.
Then what did you do?
That's just what I got to stop and think. Now, just what I did do in '59. That's when I came back up here and worked for medical again. I went back to medical in '59, and I stayed with them until '74.
And you retired in '74. I don't think I asked you, where'd you go to high school? Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to Bainbridge High School, but believe it or not, I didn't graduate. I went 2 years.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't is, I said before, my dad, he wasn't able to work, and I was taking care of things at home and doing he was farming, and I was trying to take care of the farm, and when I was 16 years old, I could quit, and I did. Quit school and went to work at home.
Now, Ralph, does this Bushmaster outfit have reunions?
They have reunions every year, and they have one usually in the last August or September, very first September in Arizona. And they have one, then they got to where they're having one east, they call it now. They're having two. They have one in the east, and it's been Pennsylvania and Virginia and other places around here. But I just haven't, I'd love to have went and still would, but I just never have the money to do it. And of course, once you want to take your family and all, just too much expense for what I have.
Do you ever hear from any of your old friends?
No. Well, now I said no. I do in a way through this, through the water bills that I get. They have write-ups, and these write-ups that I give them some different things that I recall, and pictures they got. And I get pictures of some of my buddies, and all. I see pictures in there and different things that they talk about. But I haven't saw it yet. No, I'd love to.
Ralph, when you think about a fellow with a wife and 2 kids at home, when you're out there as a second scout out there in front of an infantry platoon or whatever it happens to be, a squad or whatever it is, you ever think about exposing yourself, how that's going to affect people back home?
No, you can't think about it. You can't think about it, because actually you've got to think about your job you've got to do. You've got a job to do, and that's the way I felt about it. I had a job to do, and I got it. No, I didn't, you can't, let that barrel here, I wouldn't be worth it done out there yet if I'd let that bother me. Just tell you the truth about it.
Yeah.
Because, in other words, it's like you or anyone else, if you had a job to do, that's where I felt I had a job I should sit over there to do. And in other words, take the consequences. And of course, thank goodness, I was able to come back in one piece and no problem there. And I will say that a lot of it might have been luck because I heard a lot of bullets whistling back in my head. In other words, it's close enough that I call some of it good old luck.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe that's about it. Let's shake hands here,
Yeah,
Ralph.
sure.
I think you did a good job here today. We're trying to